Welcome to the About podcast. Here we explore your financial health in simple and easy to understand ways.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the About podcast. This is Jeremy Scott, one of your hosts here, but not alone, as I never am, because I have Roy Hucke with me. Roy, how you doing?
I am wonderful. Really interested in the topic today.
Yeah, me too. So we're talking about something that's actually, as if you've listened to the podcast before, or Roy certainly knows, is kind of close to home for me, both personally and professionally. But we're talking about the loss of a spouse. And today we're going to do that in kind of a general table setting sort of way. This is going to be the beginning of probably a series of topics based on this idea and the kind of unique challenges that are presented when you lose that partner, your life partner that you have been doing life with. So today we're going to start talking about what that looks like. And I know, I think people might expect, Roy, those of you who know I'm a pastor, that's one of the times that I get invited into people's lives in a pretty strong ways when they lose somebody, not just like planning funerals and stuff, but also like, a lot of questions about life and what comes next and that kind of thing. But people might not be as aware or expect quite a bit that is an area that you get involved in people's lives fairly deeply as well, just because of some of the unique challenges that come up in people's financial lives at that time when we lose somebody close to us like that.
Well, in my semi-viral video that we had somebody talking about getting financially naked in front of your advisor. And yes, I do get very intimately into people's lives. And for our listeners, that was Jeremy talking about it.
It was me.
We put out a little video out on it.
Metaphorically.
It was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's just when you're talking about, doing life with somebody, it's your partner in crime.
Yep.
And then you live your life and you share responsibilities, right? You have unique talents that you have. Your spouse has other unique talents. And you guys kind of, maybe even not spokenly do those things, but you do them just unspokenly, right?
There is a division of labor.
That's right.
Within any relationship period, but definitely in the relationship with your spouse, because it's the person you spend the most time with and you're building a household with and maybe you're raising children with. There is a division of labor that sort of just naturally develops where they take on one thing and, you take on the other thing. And it's not efficient for you to not do that.
Yep.
Right. So I think as humans, it's just nature. And one of the things that gets utterly decimated when suddenly that person isn't there is, oh, wait, you become very keenly aware very quickly the things that they were doing that you weren't responsible for, right, that suddenly now you're responsible for.
I see it in the spouses I work with. There's a trend. I don't know how it happens or why it happens, but in every relationship you have the person, and it's not even men or women anymore. I think it used to be, but not anymore. And one of them is the money person.
Right.
And they're the ones that kind of run the books for the home and the household and make sure everything stays organized. And we know exactly what's going on. But when you lose a spouse, I hear about a lot of the other things.
Yep.
Like, I don't know all the other little things, like who cooks the meal or does the laundry or cleans the bathroom or mows the lawn, right? But I do hear it at the back end, right? Something as simple as I've never blown out my sprinklers before.
Right.
I didn't even know I needed to do that because he did that. I didn't even really pay attention.
Right. Even more basic than that, I was listening to another podcast. There are many good ones out there. And it was about empathy. And it was a guy was talking. He's like, oh yeah, I was going to the gas station and somebody was like, clearly didn't know what they were doing and didn't know how to, and we're just kind of driving in circles and kept getting in my way. And I got so mad and so frustrated with them that I honked at them and I whipped around this poor person and went and parked and started pumping my gas. And that person got out of the car and they started walking over to me. And I thought, oh great, now this person's going to yell at me. And it was some woman and she's like, I'm sorry, I've never pumped gas before. My husband died last week. I have no idea what I'm doing. Right. Can you help? And he was, and of course, he was like, I felt like the world's biggest jerk. And I'm like, yes, but it can be down to that basic. Like, you just don't know. And sometimes you just don't know. Like, just I'd never had to think about that.
Never done it. Never thought about it. You just had it done for you. Yeah. So that's why I think the catalyst for this conversation today is twofold. One, I'm just seeing this all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I have a lot of clients who are widowed and widowers, and I have a lot of married clients.
Yep.
And the reality is I do a lot of tax planning for people, and I have to really make sure people understand that at some point in your life, the tax code is going to go from married filing jointly to single.
Right.
Because one of you are going before the other.
Right.
Never a fun topic, but for the purpose of the tax conversation, I have to make sure they understand why I'm giving them recommendations based off of being married and filing jointly.
Right.
And that's hard to think about, but to think about your partner being gone, like that's not a fun conversation to have. But I know that it's coming, and I'm trying to help prepare them as best I can.
With that little in-between step of qualified widower tax status, which
That's
I
right.
had no idea existed
Just
until I filed that way.
Just so our listeners know, when you lose your spouse, you have 2 years to be able to use that status, which basically gives you a married filing jointly status.
Right.
And then the 3rd year from there, you have to then file as single. So I actually have that going on for a few of my clients right now, and we're taking the tax planning, in the current year and the next year, so we can maximize how much they're taking out of their retirement accounts because they're married filing jointly. So their married filing jointly bracket is much broader than their single filer tax bracket.
Yeah. And I think as we just kind of by way of introduction, because this is the introduction of a whole probably like series of videos where we get kind of into the weeds, we're probably going to open some doors today that we're not going to walk through because we'll do that later. And also the thing I want to acknowledge that, while like losing a spouse is like one thing, the way that happens and what phase of life you're in when it happens varies dramatically. I think it's different. I've walked with lots of people, my own personal experience, but then I'm walking with lots of other people through it. It's different if you still have kids at home versus, whether you're an empty nest, or, if you're still working versus you're retired, or, whatever. I mean, I think the life circumstance around you can make the experience of losing a spouse, on the kind of logistical part of life different depending on what life stage you're in too. So it's not even just losing a spouse isn't like one monolithic experience that everybody experiences the same. It's gonna have different challenges or different things that come with it depending on where in your life phase you are. And I just want to kind of acknowledge that from the beginning. So some of what we talk about might be, applicable to anybody in this situation. I think, we won't get into this because it's not really this kind of podcast, but for me, like the grief part of it is usually where I work with people.
I actually think that's a very big part of this.
It is. And I think the grief is fairly similar. You're going to experience a process of grief no matter when and how long you've had your partner. But there are other things that will pop up. My experience, still having 2 children at home, and also the circumstances in which you lose the spouse. There's a difference between something happening very suddenly or something that maybe you can see coming if it's like more of a medical condition and, that kind of thing. So,
So I think this conversation is important. It's not comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable, but people need to know that this is real.
it is.
Even though you don't want to face it sometimes.
Yeah. And when you're going through it, you're not alone.
That's right.
You're not alone. So many other people. And frankly, I mean, most people, if they get married, if they choose to get married and have a spouse, most people will go through this at some point. It's you don't want to recognize it and you don't want to talk about it. And I don't want people to like dwell on it. I mean, by any means, but it is an experience that most people will share. So I think that the lost spouse comes with a lot of feeling of aloneness, and just to say right from the beginning, you're not alone. You've people around you. You get people who care. Yep. People who have gone through it before, I think there's a little bit of hope in that.
Yeah, and then the big side of this, financially speaking, is you can do a lot to prepare for the worst case. And I always tell people I'm always preparing for worst case, not best case, right? And I know I'm not the fun person to go talk to all the time, but we do like to have fun around here.
We do.
And whether you have young kids and are married, or if you're in the retirement stage of life, the what ifs come along. What if you lose your life, health, or job if you're still working?
Yeah.
And those things have to be thought through.
Yeah.
And if you do think through those in a way that, is thoughtful, when the worst thing occurs that you personally experienced, you're going to be in a better situation than you would have been otherwise. Right. So I would like, Jeremy, if you're willing and able to, everybody, I just sprung this on Jeremy today, by the way, because I didn't really want him thinking about it in advance, because it's not a fun thing to think about.
No.
But you experienced loss of your wife, and you had young kids at home.
3 years ago Sunday, as we record this.
Yes. Would you be able to kind of walk us through some of those experiences that you had that you just completely floored you?
Yeah. Oh man, there are so many. I think, one of the things that struck me. So in my case, it was sudden. It was very unexpected. One day she was there, the next day she was gone. And nothing that led us to understand that that's where we were heading. So, completely by surprise. I think one of the things that kind of floored me from the beginning was how quickly things change. When I called her work to say, hey, she's not coming in today. And you're trying to work through all those processes, like literally they stopped paying her that day. And so like her next paycheck that was, came a week out was half of what it normally was. And then there was never a paycheck after that, which makes sense. Of course that's how it works. But you're
the
just
actual execution of that is very real.
The actual execution of that is very real. While at the same time, if you're lucky, and for her, she did have some death benefits through work, and we did have some life insurance and all that. But that takes time. Yep. So that piece takes longer. I think the other piece was she carried the health insurance for my kids, for her and her kids. I was on a separate policy, but she carried those. Well, they graciously extended that to the end of the month. And so in May, well outside of the normal season for doing these things, I'm scrambling to try to figure out like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to provide health insurance to my kids? So, it kind of makes sense when you think about it. You're like, well, of course it does. They're not going to pay her for work she didn't do. And if she's not working anymore, not employed, then she doesn't get benefits. And of course that all makes sense. And it's all happening right there at a time when you're dealing with 1,000 other things. It's like, I am the least mentally equipped to deal with this. And yet now I have to deal with all of these really, really important things because my children need health insurance. And then there's things called COBRA, and all of that. There are some things to fill the gap. And then, of course, you're dealing with, so I think that was the number one takeaway was just like how immediately, like literally the next day or that day or the next day, things are changing, things are shifting, and things are shifting dramatically on some very basic things like your level of income. And so that's when you're like, oh, okay. Shout out to our emergency fund episode.
Yes.
Thank God, that there's some stuff to kind of fill in the gap and some wonderful people who, stepped in and did that, kind of stepped in to help me, navigate those times. But I think that's my biggest memory of that initial kind of response was just how quickly, things shift.
And shocking that was, like, she's gone, and now this is even making it more real.
Yeah. Like it's almost unreal. And I think this is, especially if you're in the situation where you're not, but even honestly, even when I've met with people who, maybe it was a medical condition and they had a few months notice and they knew somebody was going to pass away, it's never not a surprise.
Yeah.
You always think that person has one more day. Yep. You never think, oh, today's the day. Rarely, if ever. And so those pieces was incredibly, that was probably the most surprising thing was just how quickly things shift and change.
So that was the kind of the shock and awe phase of things.
Yeah.
And then as things, I always talk to clients about this, it's like when you lose somebody, there's a lot of commotion out of the gate.
Yeah.
And then that kind of settles down, let's say post burial.
Yeah, it does. People start to peel off about then, you're surrounded by support really strongly in the beginning. And then, there's people there for a while, and it's not, I have people around me the whole time. Which was lovely. There was never there wasn't ever be people far away, but there is this time when you start to settle in and realize like, oh, there's this new normal.
Yeah.
And we're like, all right, how do we get from here to there? And then you are sort of faced with all these things, we kind of talked about at the beginning, all these things that I don't know, right? Because it's interesting, like in my in my previous marriage, she was the one who managed the books. So I don't even know that I had a login for our banking account, right? And now I'm the one that does it. We swapped. And in my marriage now, my wife now used to be the one that does it, and then she stopped doing it. So we both swapped.
Is there a reason for you that you swapped?
I think it's just what ended up happening more
wasn't
than anything.
Like this conscious, like I'd like to be in more control of this area.
I think it was because I was recently the one. I had to recently just taken all that function over and sort of consolidate it into a new thing. I was just like, all right, and
I'm already up and running. I'm good to go.
We are, and we consolidated onto my bank, not hers, and that kind of thing. So it just became, I think, it was one of those things. And I think she was willing. I was interested because I hadn't done it before, and she had done it long enough that she was willing to give it up. She's like, great, fine. I've dealt with that for 20 years. I don't want to deal with it anymore. So great. But like, for me, the other piece of it was like, I knew, again, the other big surprise thing is like, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? About just basically how our life worked and how our life functioned, to the point that I happened to know the 4-digit code for her phone. And that was it, which I'm very grateful I had, because from there I could then do password resets on everything else. But I didn't know the password to her email. Why would I need to know that? I didn't know the password to her laptop. Why would I need to know that? Like or any of these things. And so thankfully I had her phone, so I could do 2-factor and I could do password resets. And I'm like, if I hadn't known those 4 numbers, we would have figured it out. But it just that one thing that made it nice to know.
It would have been more difficult.
But I'm like, God, it would have been nice if that was written down somewhere. And maybe it was, and I just didn't know where, because we just hadn't talked about it. But yeah, that whole I didn't even know this was a thing.
So,
right.
Question for you: in your new marriage,
yeah,
do you guys share that information?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I know where she keeps hers, and she knows where I keep mine. So
that's awesome.
So
you've learned.
Yeah. And then finally, as I'm sitting here thinking, because you put me on the spot with this one, right? Thinking
do.
through. The other thing that I learned, interestingly, was when you are calling places and different companies, organizations, or something you have accounts with or whatever, and trying to figure things out, tell them while you're calling, because my spouse just died is the e-ticket to the good customer service. Like that is let me get you into the special department. And I'm going to cry about this. This is so funny. But they will they'll literally okay. And they'll first thing they'll say, half the time this happened, they're like, well, oh my gosh, Mr. Scott, we're so sorry to hear about this. How can we help you? Like most companies, big companies maintain something big happened, like the marquee customer service level. And it is the express ticket into there to say, I don't know what I'm doing. My spouse just died and I'm trying to figure this piece out. Like the grunt level, normal, open, answer the phone person is going to immediately transfer you to the people who actually can help you.
Humanity is still very empathetic.
They will find, yes. Now I haven't, if you get the robo guy, I haven't figured out there's no
keep pressing 0.
Okay, just keep pressing 0. There's no if your spouse died, press 26. It's just not really a thing. So.
Yeah, so that's where one AI could be bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you went through a unique situation where you had to kind of figure out the digital piece of her life.
Yeah.
So thankfully you were able to do that pretty easily. And then from there, how did that journey continue? And I do think it's okay to talk about the grief because, investing is emotional. Money is emotional. And the emotion you feel on the backside of the loss of somebody can affect your financial life in a negative or positive way.
Right.
And I think it has to be, it just has to be real and discussed.
Right. I think so. And I think it's deeply impactful. And it's in a way that I think, I've never lost a limb. Right. But I imagine it's somewhat similar. There was this thing that's basically you feel like has always been there and you anticipated always being there that is not there anymore. And again, I think that doesn't necessarily change if it's if it's expected or unexpected, because you just get used to what you're used to. And you start to realize how much that impacts all the different areas of your life. And I know once you get past that initial, all right, I've figured out, how to pay my bills and I've figured out, how to do all this basic, housekeeping stuff to make sure, all of that's done. And then you're like left with the, like, this now what conversation. You're like, okay, like what do I do now? Because everything I've been doing in life has been built around this idea that there were two of us and we were working together, and we're in the home we're in because usually for those kinds of reasons. And for me, that summer afterwards, 'cause it happened in May, and then thankfully I was in a place where I got was granted a whole good chunk of time off from work, which is nice.
So you had a bereavement from work.
I had a bereavement, and I think that's important too. People need to really think through. Some people want to get back to work because they want the distraction of it, and I think that can be useful and helpful. But it really probably depends on the kind of work that you do, right? I mean, if you're an accountant, and God love our accountants, and you're just sitting there playing with numbers all day, maybe that is a distraction, and maybe you do want to get back to work. My wife just had this experience where her best friend since childhood just lost her husband at 52, a little bit more expected, but still not easy. And she went back to work relatively quickly because she needed something to do. And she had the kind of job where that was fine. For me, I wasn't sure I could go back to work. As a pastor, you're so deeply embedded into a community.
Well, can you imagine having to go and help someone going through the loss of somebody while you're dealing with it?
Right. And
that's impossible.
Yeah. And before, because, my first wife was in healthcare and we were both kind of in the caring professions, we could support each other. And so that worked, really, really well, and kind of losing that. And then it's just like, oh my gosh, can I, do I have the emotional bandwidth to do my job? Because, my job requires me to have sympathy and empathy, in a way that, some professions do and some professions don't. So, I think that's important. I mean, for some folks, you may say, oh, and my neighbor, when they lost their husband, she was back at work, a couple of weeks later, but, she's a bank teller or, whatever, like, okay, that might make sense for her. But if you're in, a profession where you're in like one of the caring professions where you're required to be, your whole job is to be sympathetic and empathetic to people, that might take a little while longer, to get back. And even, I don't know if you remember, but I mean, I came back for a Sunday, then I took a Sunday off, and I was kind of there every other Sunday. And I don't know if I ever told very many people this, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, we're going to try, and then we'll see how this goes. And I remember very clearly when the first funeral came up afterwards, and we're like, well, we're going to see how this goes. And it was a little touch and go for me. Like I might have to, you were, and I was like, I might be going back to writing software. It was like, I don't know.
Can I handle it? Yeah.
And so I think the biggest thing that I learned in that situation was to be okay with that uncertainty, to basically to give yourself permission to not decide.
Or give yourself permission to just feel how you feel.
Feel how you feel. Try what you want to try. Our church was amazing about it to the point when I even said, hey, I think I'm coming back this Sunday. The leadership basically said, well, you don't need to. We got this. Like, take as long as you need. And I'm like, and I remember talking to our council chair at the time. I was like, no, I need to know. I need to come back and try and to see if this is something I can do. So, I know they say, I think the standard is, don't make any big decisions for a year. I don't know that there's like that kind of hard and fast rule. It really is situational, and it kind of depends. But I think the intention behind that is to say, you don't have to decide everything on day 2. Like you just say, we're just going to figure this out as we go.
Yeah. I think the real intention behind that is just like, listen, take a pause, take a breath. You don't have to make the big decisions right away.
Right.
You have time to think through them, sleep on them, talk to people that you trust and love in your life, and make a decision that's right at the right time.
Yeah. And then when something becomes clear, don't be afraid to make the decision you need to make that's right for you, even if it's the one that doesn't necessarily make the best, quote unquote financial sense, even if that. So like for me, within after about 6 or 7 months, like it became clear to me that, I staying in this community that I'd already been involved in, that had loved and cared for me so well and my kids so well, like that made sense. And not only could I stay there, the idea of being anywhere else, right? The idea of trying to like go and, because I was offered like, do you want to go? That would be a normal reason for a pastor to leave a church and go to a new one. And I'm like, I don't want to go to learn how to love 300 new people again. Like I already love these people. I don't want to do that. So that became fairly obvious after a few months. I'm like, nope, I want to stay. But what also became very obvious is I couldn't stay in the house.
Yeah.
And that was hard because it was a parsonage and I didn't own it. But I became, if that became clear for me, is like there was too much. It wasn't worth it to me to work through all of the emotional baggage that physical space brought with it for me and my kids. Like I'm just like, it's not worth it to me. Like I don't.
Well, and I saw that in very real time, by the way, because
you were part of it.
You're like, I could stay here, right? That was the thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I'm okay. And then as time went on, you're like, no, I'm not okay.
Yeah,
I can't stay here. This isn't going to work.
Yeah, I noticed in myself, like I couldn't walk across the street because the house was across the street from the church, which I used to think was lovely. But I'm like, I couldn't even walk across the street without feeling anxiety, and that anxiety never went away, and it actually got worse. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, I can either do a year's worth of therapy to get okay with this physical space, or I could just not live in this physical space anymore. And that's probably the right thing to do. Yeah. And, and that was a hard conversation with the church and to make all that work. And if it's a home you own, for some people, and I've seen this with people just in general, is some people like they need to stay in the place where they shared that life with their person and they want to be surrounded by those memories and everything. Others can't, like they need to take a break. They need a new space, and you bring something of that person with them. There's still, there's some of Dane in our new house. From stuff that's hers and things that we shared together and everything like that. But again, I think that's part of where you need to give yourself permission to have your own journey with this stuff. And just because, your friend or whoever, that was important to them doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to want to make a different decision. And you should feel empowered to make the decisions that you need for you.
Well, and this is a perfect example, though, about the grief piece, because the grief and the experience that you had in your head was, I'm going to be fine staying here.
Yeah.
You experience the actual grief, the feelings you feel, and you realize, like, I can't, but it was a financial decision.
Yes.
For you. Okay. And that's why I really make that connection so intentionally, because that will come up for people.
Yeah.
And just know that that's when you're not alone.
Yeah.
Right. Go talk to your financial advisor, talk to your friends, talk to your family.
Well, having somebody, because we had these conversations, you and I, Roy, and I was just like, we need to figure out how to do this. Like, I hadn't planned on, purchasing a home, while we were here, and all that kind of stuff. So we had to kind of figure out in kind of quick order, like how that was going to work and how we could make that work, for us. And so, and I don't know, and again, maybe you're like, that may not, from a dollars and cents perspective, be the most sound fiscal decision, but it was the decision that needed to be made. Mm-hmm. And the thing I've always appreciated about you, Roy, is like you rolled with it. You're like, yes, absolutely. If that's what you need to do, then that's what we need to do. And we figure out how to do it. And so having that, that having you there to kind of help us navigate and help me navigate, like, okay, well, this is how we can make that happen. That I understand that goal, that's your goal. Okay, let's make it work. That was very helpful. I know for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the same approach I've taken with anybody who's dealing with that same thing is, there's reasonable and unreasonable. And I just try and help people, think through it reasonably. And, 9 times out of 10, people come to the right conclusion. I don't tell them, but they come to the right conclusion.
Right.
And anyways, so that's a part of the grief piece, and that's part of the financial decisions that come up and you could be forced into in a way. Yeah. It's like even, for instance, client, passed away in their car. Do you keep the car that you have this debt on, right? Or do you sell it at a loss? Right. So there are things beyond just the financial numbers and cents that have to be considered, and we just figure it out from there. But anyways, that's just like, right? So
it's funny you bring that up because we had just bought her a new car. And thankfully it was kind of an in-demand thing. And so, but 6 months later I took it back to the dealership and I'm like, I can't do this. Can't do this. Yep. And then a year later it was a different brand, but I bought almost exactly the same kind of car again, because I needed that kind of car again.
You did like it, but you just didn't want the emotional feelings connected to the one you had.
Yeah, I was just like, no, we don't need this. So I was like, but you got to make those decisions that are right for you.
So as we continued on then, and the big thing for a year is I think the year is used a lot of times because financially speaking, there's a lot of things that come just once a year.
Right.
So was there anything for you, financial or not financial, that you experienced within kind of that first year that, it caught you off guard, or, that was another like knife to the heart, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's these things that come up and I'm like, you can't prepare people for it, but just know like, hey, stuff's going to happen.
Yeah. Filing the taxes was weird. Just because I'm like, oh yeah. But there was less of that. And actually what I ran into more was just, gratitude for the work we had already done. Because it was only a year before she passed that and you helped us with this. We took her 9 different retirement accounts from all these different places, because she had a little bit of attention from here, and we had consolidated that on into one IRA.
Yep.
I can't imagine trying to untie that knot without her. Yep. Right? Like, if I had to go, okay, now I got to go deal with all these 9 different people, but I can't even deal with it. Like, she can't even deal with it. I've got to deal with it on her back. Like, it would have been a disaster. So grateful, for that. So I think it was more things like that I ran into. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm glad we already kind of thought about this and worked on it. So glad for the emergency fund we had put together. I mean, clearly that was important. I would say the only good financial surprise in the whole thing was to learn that apparently if you pass away, your student loans go away. That is the only thing that will discharge a student loan, because
as long as it's not consolidated.
As long as you're not, yeah. And that is something we had done some but we happened to do it in a way, not intentionally, but we happened to do it in a way that it was still dischargeable. But that is something, not to think necessarily to think about, but it was a definite benefit, because that was really, because of the way we had been paying off debt, that was really the only big debt we had left. Just happened to be her student loans. That was the most dollar amount that we owed. And literally you file a piece of paper and poof, in the certificate, and then $100,000 is just gone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So I think that was more the experience of just saying, I'm so glad that we had already prepped and done these things, because it made it just, I couldn't imagine trying to do those after the fact, because it is a bigger pain to do financial things, because there's a lot of stuff that was just in her name.
Yep.
I think that's a couple things. Like, honestly, when we purchased that car, it was only in her name. And I don't even remember why. I think because when we were at the dealership, you weren't
there.
She happened to be the one signing the paper or whatever like that. So I was just like, so I had to go down to the DMV and I had to do all this stuff. And they were the one place that was not immediately nicer when you told them that while you were there. Not to throw shade. I know they do their best. But I am like, God, I wish we had, put both of our names, on those accounts.
Well, and so 2 things off that, what you said there. Number one, I'm dealing with this with a client right now that's struggling with multiple institutions, and it's not struggle. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
So, I say to clients a lot of times, they think they're diversifying sometimes by having money in different places. Mm-hmm. And to a point, that's true, right? If your parents lived through the depression or bank failures that have occurred over time, like they're like, I can't have everything in one place. I could lose it all.
Right.
Well, I always tell people in investing, you don't want all your eggs in one basket, but you want all your hens in one hen house. Right?
I like that. I like it.
So, having oversight over assets, and knowing that, in this institution versus institution number 2 versus institution number 3, who's the person that has to oversee the risk that's upon all that money, and if you're really diversified? Mm-hmm. And the answer is the client. Because as a financial advisor, I don't know. I don't oversee those assets. I don't know if you're making changes. Like, I have no idea. Right. So that's where that comment comes from, is like, if we have all our hens in one hen house, we can at least see what's going on, making sure that all of our eggs aren't in one basket.
Right.
And then secondarily, this is something for our listeners to know, that even for you with that car, right? If you guys have power of attorney in place Typically with spouses, a lot of times it'll be a power of attorney that has immediate power of attorney, meaning that it exists upon signing the document.
Right.
Where if it's a non-spouse, usually they have what they call springing power of attorney, meaning there has to be an event that occurs to create the power that the power of attorney can then use.
Right.
Okay, so as a spouse, she could have still had you on the documents and just signed your name as your power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't have to go anywhere.
Right.
Right. So that stuff can happen. So people sometimes do it just for the sake of convenience, but it's actually not that convenient when you had to do what you had to do. Right. And you're not the only one of my clients that's ever had to do that. And it's pretty awful, honestly.
Yeah.
So that's a good thought process, though, for our listeners of if you are married right now, do we have all of our assets in each other's name or not? Sometimes there's reasons not to. Mm-hmm. But let's think through that and make sure we understand that. And if you have money in only your name or only their name, why? If you can't answer why, then maybe we shouldn't have it in only one person's name. Right. And then some people are like, well, I have a beneficiary on it. Well, great. But the account gets locked essentially upon death. Like for me, if somebody tells me someone dies, the account's locked. Right. For these, there's no legal person that can act on this account now until it goes through the process. Well, the process requires a death certificate.
Yes.
How long does a death certificate take? It depends. I had a client recently in a different state. It took like multiple months.
Yes.
So that account is sitting there.
It depends on what kind you need.
That's right.
Because you might preliminary ones, at least in Colorado, you can get fairly quickly, but then some like for life insurance, you've got to have the cause of death lifted, which can sometimes take a while.
Which isn't the only thing. Like there are situations where it takes multiple times. Or I had a client that passed away just after getting life insurance one time. Well, the life insurance company is like, well, we're going to go ahead and do a thorough investigation of what actually occurred here, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so those things can happen that cause delays. Mm-hmm. And if you think it's going to be quick, it may not be quick. And if you don't have your name on the account and you were expecting to be able to pay bills from that account, you might not be able to.
Right.
So anyway, just something for people to think through on why you do some of that stuff. And then, now that when you transitioned to having everything in your own name, what was the first thing you did after that to try and protect your situation?
We did estate planning. Right?
That's right. You did. Good job.
Did.
I'm really glad you got that prompt.
Yeah. No, we definitely did. We sat down because by the time it was all settled, when she passed, both of my kids were still, under 18 and living at home. But in that 6 months afterwards, I had one kid turn 18, graduate high school and turn 18. That's a fun time to lose your spouse, by the way, 2 weeks before graduation. And I'm like, well, crud, now what? And I'm like, all right, we got to get this straightened out. And so, yes, we sat down and did pretty, standard, I'm sure what was standard estate planning, but very intentional.
It was a substantial change.
Yes. And recognize like, oh, okay, whatever we had before, which was actually fairly minimal. I mean, thankfully, our situation was fairly straightforward because we'd only ever been married to each other and both of our kids belonged to both of us and they were both minors and actually she happened to also be an only child, so as far as like probate and all that kind of stuff goes, it was actually fairly straightforward because there wasn't anybody else that was going to, raise a hand because that's just so we could do the simple probate process. And so in Colorado, that was actually fairly straightforward, which was nice. But even a little bit later, if my oldest son had been over 18, that might have, complicated things a little bit. So yes, we did estate planning to clear all that up and say, okay, who's doing what?
I would say for most people, that's probably the biggest financial decision in the first year that you do need to not avoid.
Yes.
And for me as a financial advisor, I will typically ask people if I don't already have it, which for my clients, I typically have it.
Yeah.
But if I don't, let's say they're a newer client or something like that, that's the first thing I'm going to get because the reality is they may not need to make any changes. Example, somebody's spouse passed away. The attorney's like, yeah, we'll update those documents for you. And the question I asked, for the client, I should say, the question I asked the attorney was, do they need it? Because all they were doing was taking the spouse's name off of everything. Well, in the documents, it already had if they die, then this happens. So all that the client needed to do was put the death certificate with those documents, and we were good.
And they were done.
So I tell people this because just because someone passes doesn't mean you make changes or spend $2,000 to update your plan to take their name off of it.
Oh,
And that's what I felt like the attorney was kind of like, well, yeah, we can do that. Absolutely. We'll take care of that for you. But they're going to send them a bill.
Right.
That they didn't need to do that. So
Right.
that's why I start there with like, what do we want to happen? Does that what your documents actually do? And then, bring in the attorney if they don't. Right. Like, and the blended family stuff is really problematic.
Oh, yeah.
That's really problematic, man.
Once you move into that one.
The biggest problem I have even now, like, one of my good friends is got a blended family, and the state conversation has come up for years. And there's still no decision.
Yeah.
So the reality is, if you make no decision, the decision is that you're making is you're following the law of the state that you're living in.
Right. You're letting somebody else make the decision.
That's right.
Yeah, we shout out to, I think, our multiple estate planning episodes.
We do have
at
a
this
couple.
point.
Yeah.
And I think we even talked about, when we did when I did my most recent estate planning, because now we are a blended family, and and all that, and trying to untie that knot.
And you remember that was uniquely.
Oh,
we thought through that a few different ways, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think we have a really good solution, don't you?
No, it was great. It was great,
Yeah.
and we'll have to.
But it is a solution that's acceptable to you and your new wife.
Yes.
And I think it's good.
No, I know it's great. It's great. And, she appreciated it too. She was a little hesitant going in, but I was just like, yes. But, and there is this, I will say, one of the things that if you have lived through it once, the loss of a spouse, and you're, if you're younger, then there's a chance you may get, like I did, you might get remarried and all that. There is, in terms of like things I've learned, there is a perspective that you bring into that new relationship, because that you kind of have to love your partner into, because like it's not academic, right? Like, so we were having these estate planning conversations, like there was a couple times I'm like, this is not an academic conversation to me. And it's like, I'm not planning for anything. Like, I'm not planning to get hit by a bus tomorrow, and I'm not planning for you to get hit by a bus tomorrow, but I happen to live a reality where I know that that's possible. And so, it's you do have a different kind of, you do develop a different kind of perspective around things too afterwards, that I occasionally have to remind myself, like, oh, right, everybody hasn't had this lived experience that I have had that gives me this particular set of concerns, that I'm like, okay. And, so I need to kind of love and educate them through that a little bit, depending on whether, how much they care or don't care about whatever it is.
Well, and, shout out to speaking about financial matters with loved ones, which I think we could specifically probably focus in on spouses at some point, to like, you have spouses who don't talk about money.
Yep.
And then you have people who become new spouses like you.
Yeah.
And then how do we get on the same financial page?
Yeah.
And those are, I think, equally important for people. And that could be another podcast idea for folks out there.
Yeah, I've been filing away multiple ideas based on, where we, because I feel like there's a lot of, as we said at the beginning, there's some doors we open here that we haven't closed, and that's fine. But like, okay, we walk through that. But I think maybe towards the end of the series, there is the, if you are of, especially if you're of an age where it's likely, what does it look like to remarry?
Yep.
And it's different. I will tell you, like, and that's been my most recent surprise, I think, more than anything, was I feel like my experience of being remarried is different than my spouse's, because my spouse's is divorced.
Yes.
And there's a difference in how
different dynamic.
It's a different dynamic when there's still the other spouse is still there, you have to negotiate with, and also just a different kind of perspective, I think, sometimes on things, as far as the when we're thinking about our life and our household and and all of that. I think you come into it with a slightly different perspective, depending on if you were both previously married, like why it is you were no longer married. I think the experience of being widowed is different than the experience of being divorced. There's some similarities for sure.
One's a choice,
but
could be a choice.
Could be a choice.
Could not be a choice for one of the people.
Yeah. But it is a different perspective, and how do you navigate that? And first, it comes with recognizing that the experience is different.
Yeah.
Because I think any experience of being, and I think, divorces are different. Anything that ends a marriage, whether or not it's, in divorce, or whether or not it's, somebody passing away, there are some things that are the same. But as we opened from the beginning, my experience of being widowed is going to be different than somebody else's,
Yeah.
even somebody around my same age.
Yep.
Maybe they had kids at home, maybe they didn't, maybe they're in a different profession, maybe they were stay-at-home, maybe, they were the stay-at-home spouse and they had the one who passed was the breadwinner, or the other way around.
Yep.
I have had that. And it's amazing how dramatic that can be when, somebody had a partner who was the stay-at-home spouse who was raising the kids and everything, and they're the ones that get sick and they're the ones that pass away. Like that is every bit, I think, is disorienting to them as the other way around.
Yep. I think for our listeners too, to understand, like for me, the widower concept is really personal because my grandma was widowed around, I think, age three or four for me.
Oh,
Like I actually remember my grandpa vaguely.
yeah.
I don't remember the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, my mom told me I was handing out Kleenexes to people. I'm 3 or 4. I have no idea.
Well, he's always helpful.
But my grandma being a widow for basically 35 years of my life before she passed is my experience of a widow.
Yeah.
Okay. And I look at that as those people are like my grandma. And so I have this warm and fuzzy that exists in my mind for those people because my grandma lived it, and I saw all the unique things that she had to deal with on her own.
Yeah.
And then me, the grandson, didn't have to, but I picked up the pieces in some places, meaning I mowed her lawn. I picked up, she lived out in the country and she had tree branches falling on her lawn all the time. And somebody had to pick those up. Right. So guess what I got to do? Or, things like that are hard to do when you're alone.
Yeah.
So there's just this unique experience. It's all different for everybody that I know exists.
Mm-hmm.
And then even, Becky, boss lady Becky around here, we call her, right?
Yeah. She is the one that really is.
She
Kinda keeps the trains running on time.
That's
Yeah.
right. She is a widow and she experienced a long drawn out illness for her spouse. So a much different, unique situation.
Absolutely.
So she has the perspective of she 100% understands what people are going through.
Yeah.
That makes us very unique in that regard.
I think so.
And then even you, funny. I mean, it's just funny how like this concept just keeps evolving. Like you're my podcast host, and this is something you're uniquely experienced with, which is not awesome.
No.
But I think that helps give perspective in a way that is very real. And I was even talking to one of my clients that does travel for folks, and the experience of someone being a widow or widower and they're going on a trip and they don't want to be the third wheel, so they just don't go.
Yeah.
That's real.
No, we were talking about before the mics came
That's
on.
right.
Yep, absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
real.
Yeah.
And, being able to help people deal with that, or even have, other shared experiences of people that are similar in the same boat, right?
Yep.
All that stuff is more than money.
Yeah.
Right.
It is.
That's not about the money at that point. It's about the experience, the grief, how do I survive now?
Yep.
And that's way more than money.
And I think so. And I think that's one of the things that is common, like there, because it's common to the whole experience is like the okay, what now? It's just like, who am I now without this person that has been, a part of my life for, usually years, at that point. And how does life go looking forward? And, I had people, say to me, there was actually people who I didn't know had been widowed. Even in our own church, who I didn't know that had been part of their life experience, who only told me afterwards. And there was a lot of like, welcome to the club nobody wants to be part of.
Yep.
And you were like, yep. And so now, I've said the same thing to Emily's friend, who I've only met a handful of times, but she was about my age.
Emily is your current spouse.
Emily's my current spouse. Yes. And so when her best friend, and they, had one of those situations where, her husband, was given 3 to 6 months, actually made it 18 with a brain tumor, but did finally pass this spring. And, I was hearing their conversation when she called to tell Emily that he had finally passed, and I was, oh my gosh, I was just like, I know that voice, and I know that conversation, and I know it stinks because you have to have that same conversation 27 times in a 12-hour span, where you just, because people you want to tell, the people you don't want to hear, see it on Facebook, right? You'd be like, I want to be the ones to tell you this, and how wearying and all that is, and so it's also really nice to have people around that know that experience and can go and can kind of, pardon the language, can acknowledge the suck, right? I'm like, this is not good. Like, this is not, it's part of life, and it's something that most people at some point we're probably going to have to deal with, and it stinks.
Yep.
And so I do love, and I do remember, I actually remember the first time I came in here, and talked to Becky, afterwards, because I needed to get some stuff signed or notarized or whatever, and there was, I don't honestly know that I knew that part of her story, but that look of acknowledgement, like, yes, I know,
And you could see it in their eye, like they get it.
Yeah,
They understand in a way that a lot of people don't.
and to have somebody like you in this place and everybody who works here, to be like, we got you on this stuff, right? Like, in the universe of things you need to worry about, your kids and and all that kind of stuff. Like,
This is not one.
We got you in this.
Yep.
And that, anytime that happened, was the best.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've always appreciated what you do, Roy, but I really do appreciate what you do around here. So
Thank you. So I just think this is a unique topic. I think it's one that most people who are married are going to experience, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It will be real. And how do we prepare you to best navigate that in regards to the financial perspective of it, so that all of the other stuff you can deal with as it comes up, because it comes in waves, as I understand it.
Mhm.
And I will tell you my grandma passed in 2015.
Mhm.
I had to go to a funeral for a client like 2 months later.
yeah.
I really didn't process the grief for my grandma. And it was like, I went to that funeral. I was like just very intensely emotional.
Yep.
At a funeral of somebody who was like an acquaintance.
Yeah.
And I'm
Nope.
sure people like what is wrong with this guy?
Yeah. No, grief is weird.
It just waves over you.
And there is no right or wrong way to do it. I tell people that all the time. It's standard fare whenever I meet with a family when they've lost a loved one. I'll always try to work into the conversation just this acknowledgement and permission to say, however it is you choose to move through these next weeks, months, years, however it is you choose to grieve, that is your journey, and no one can tell you that that's right or wrong. Like, grief is weird.
Yep.
But yeah. So I think this is an important topic, and I know, we try to keep it kind of light and fun here, but we also have to deal with things that are, real and honest and serious.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things. And so I'm actually grateful that you sprung this on me today, Roy. And
You're
it's
welcome.
something that we can talk about. And I do think we have the opportunity to provide through some future episodes some really good kind of specific information for folks. And so one of the things I want to encourage people at home or people listening to this is to say, if you know somebody who's kind of going through these situations, first just love on them. Like, don't judge what they're going through. Don't judge the decisions they're making, because, at a certain point, everybody's got to do what's right for them. And don't judge yourself if you're the one going through it. Right. I mean, just, let what you need to be, but also look for those places where you have people who can help you. And doing things even as simple as, what might sound mundane, as even just, having proper financial planning in place can be a tremendous gift at a time that's hard enough. It's always going to be hard, never going to be easy. But it doesn't have to be hard in all of the places if you've, done a little work ahead of time. Right. So there's a lot of value in that, making sure you do that. So, and of course, obviously, if you know somebody going through it, share this podcast with them. And if it's you or, somebody you know or care about, make sure you're subscribed and everything, because I think we're going to have some future episodes in this series coming up where we maybe dive in into a little more of some of the specifics of things that we just sort of touched the surface on.
That's right. Well, Jeremy, thank you for allowing me to spring this on you and giving us your unique insights, because I think it's going to be beneficial to other people who will experience it at some point.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful. And I'm always grateful for what you do, Roy, and what you do around here. and all of that. So, and I thank you guys for listening and hanging with us through both the kind of more fun things and also the more challenging things, because it's real life and we got to deal with it.
That's right. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you all.
Credentialed Wealth Advisors is a Securities and Exchange Commission registered investment advisor. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer for investment advice or the purchase or sale of any security, insurance, or other investment product. All investments involve risk, including the potential loss of principal. Before implementing any strategy discussed, individuals should consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional. While the data presented is sourced from materials believed to be reliable, its completeness and accuracy cannot be guaranteed.